get going. This part, as usual, is the one we are recording. So then we will say we are stopping here, and then we start the other part, so we have more freedom to express ourselves. We would like to talk today about something that unfortunately we all know very well. We're talking about the emotional suffering. Let's see. This is certainly part of our life that all the people that I've met have gone through in waves. Sometimes it seems to be heavier, sometimes it seems to be lighter, but we all know what it feels like. So there are several occasions in our lives when we see the bite of this particular condition. And when it's closely connected to some event, it's easier to understand. For example, I lose my job, or I have a car accident. It is pretty reasonable that I feel sad, or I feel something inside that is far from happiness, something heavy. But there are other situations when this sort of heavy condition comes without a very clear reason, or it seems to live a life of its own inside of me, and it's brought up by the slightest association, and then it seems to be the main focus of my life for a very long period of time. For example, remembering about something sad that happened to me years ago, or remembering about a person that I loved and that left me. Now, this normally we would expect to fade away with time, because other things, other people replace whoever was there. When this does not happen, then there is a problem worthy of our attention. And I would like to first of all clarify something which may seem fundamental, but may also be completely forgotten. So let's state this clearly. When we have an emotional suffering inside that we consider connected to some event, we tend to say, I am sad because that thing happened. But to be more exact, we are sad because of the reaction that happens inside. The same event could happen to me in a different occasion, or the same event could happen to a different person, and the reaction inside could be totally different. So what is really causing me to feel pain inside is some part of me that is using the external event as a trigger, but it's really something deeply mine. Let me give you a very trivial example. You have a big stadium with the fans of team A here, fans of team B here. The match ends 10-0. Now the same thing happened, but a lot of people here are very happy and a lot of people here are very sad. How can that be? Same event, such a difference. Well, of course, it's easy to understand that the expectations and the, let's say, the connection with what was on the field had an opposite polarity, so to speak, in the two sides of the stadium. But that is just a quick way to realize that we cannot accuse the outside event for what we feel inside. So we should make it our duty to understand what is inside of me that reacts so badly or so quickly to the slightest stimulus from the outside. And normally, what is happening is that we are seeing in action a particularly out of balance side of ourselves. So let's say a big weakness, a big missing piece in what should be a well-rounded psychology. There is a big hole, something missing, it should be there. That is normally the areas where small events from the so-called outside world can easily enter and create a disproportionate reaction. Let's imagine the extreme case, the person that is heartbroken. So we all have seen movies where somebody has been left by his or her lover and always takes out the picture and goes, oh, and then decides to go on some incredible adventure to forget. And then along this adventure, this person finds the real meaning of her or his life, okay? So when in that particular situation, everything seems to remind our poor hero of this person who has gone, it is as if this person had taken all of his identity, has put it in a cupboard, has closed it, and has created an artificial identity that is made to take the shape of the other person. Because, for example, I didn't have enough sense of independence or self-worth. So I found a person that was very independent, very able to assert itself or herself in this case. Then I decide that the presence of this person can be a surrogate, a substitute for my own ability to feel myself, to feel independent. So I include the presence of this person as a plug to close the hole in my personality. At that point, I may have an artificial, temporary feeling of completeness. But of course, I'm preparing a trap for myself, because when this person leaves, then all the artificial condition falls down, and I don't know why, because I had never really tried to complete myself in the real way, that is, to find what is missing and to build it by a work on myself. I instead used a surrogate. It's like a drug, just takes the shape of a person. So this is an extreme case, okay? So it may cause someone to feel heartbroken and to feel an incredible amount of pain for a long time without understanding that the problem is not the absence of a certain person. The problem is the absence of his own completeness psychologically. But we had painted onto this person a part of ourselves. So when this person leaves, we think we miss a part of ourselves. It was just a picture, okay? But it's hard to understand. Only with work on oneself, one can realize this process, which is called projection, where we attach a piece of ourselves that we cannot understand onto an external person who becomes, maybe without knowing, the carrier of our projection. So this person raises to a very big importance without knowing, maybe, but we do feel that. And we worship this person as if he or she was a god that we absolutely need in our life, which is false, of course. But it's hard to understand without turning our look inside and see why we have placed this person onto a pedestal as if he was a statue to be worshipped. So this was an example of a case that probably happened to most of us in a more or less serious proportion. We may have such a problem that lasts for a month. We may have it for much longer. And normally it's a strong push for us in order to start a search. Some of us may actually begin to attend classes in some group for esoteric search or a cult, just because we feel that something is missing, but we don't know exactly what. And that is the start of an adventure, of course. One might ask if there is really no external influence in our business to make things sometimes a bit harder. In other words, are we really the only authors of the dramas which happen in our lives? There are those who believe we receive some help sometimes from entities which are not from the physical plane. One such author is Eve Lorgen, who has written a book which is titled The Alien Love Bite, where she argues that there are several cases where some entities that feed on our emotional suffering, they want to push us into the drama. So they create artificially a situation where there is a big emotional investment from one of us onto a certain person, and then the situation is manipulated in a way that the situation breaks down, and this triggers such a problem. It doesn't need to happen just in the sentimental field. It may happen also at work or in the family with other members of the family. Do I think that's true? Do I think that's false? Well, this is a very complex cosmos, isn't it? Why rule out such a possibility? I can't really rule that out, but I'd like to add something. It's important to understand that these potential third parties that influence our life to create more drama, they are just one more ingredient from the outside world, which can be associated with the person that we consider has offended us or left us, the work market, which is very difficult, my neighbor who is very noisy. So all of them we can consider as part of the same group of external causes. Yeah, one may seem more outlandish, more fantastic because maybe on a flying saucer, but nevertheless, this is still something that belongs into that category. Why am I saying this? Because what I mean is the really important part is our own response to this. This response that can be mechanic and that can lead us into more drama if we are not paying attention to what happens inside. Or on the other hand, this response that may take a completely different turn if there is consciousness in a certain moment, which helps us to not repeat the same patterns and mistakes that we have made so many times in the past. Consciousness can make a difference while everything else can hardly make a difference. For example, if we try to solve a relationship problem just by reasoning with our head, we will certainly fail to see important things because our mind is very limited and normally acts just in a mechanical way by association. So it's very hard to see the needs and to perceive the feelings of another person, while we are very much aware of our own. So when we try to solve an emotional problem just with our mind, we are trying to do something that is impossible by definition. It's just like a person that has just had lunch cannot understand a hungry person. There is a physiological difference that makes it impossible for the two to really communicate. I guess you know what I mean. It takes a sort of frequency alignment before we can communicate. So the difference that may come from using consciousness in dealing with these problems is just like the difference between night and day, quite literally, because you're injecting light into a situation which otherwise is invisible. So you're casting all of a sudden the beauty of light into something that you couldn't know because it was in the darkness. Let's not forget that consciousness and light go in parallel, and it is an excellent metaphor. And I think one day we might get to stating that it's actually an identity. But for now, let's just say for argument's sake that the light is a very great metaphor for consciousness. And whatever light does, you can think that consciousness is able to do, and vice versa. So far, this is the apology of presence and self-remembering as the real way to go to the root cause and to really change the situations which cause us to react with pain. But it doesn't happen overnight. So I'd like to also consider what we can do to tackle the attack of a moment of sadness or emotional suffering, which may help us in the short term in order not to succumb and not to feel hopeless, which is a great way for certain, let's say, entities to draw this so-called luge from us. And we don't want to give them too much because that costs really a sort of internal wear and tear. A little bit of suffering may help us do the right thing, but more than so can become really something that consumes us and prevents us from seeing that there is a beautiful side to life. In order to talk about potential remedies, I have chosen to have a look at a point of view that is the one of so-called archetypes, based on what is most active in my life in a certain moment of these figures that belong to the, let's say, world of ideas, and that sometimes we incarnate. For example, when I feel like attacking directly against my problems and going straight into the heart of the problem to solve it, I may be my inner warrior that has been activated. When I try to change things by art of intuition and magic, I may have summoned the wizard inside of me. So there are certain figures that are very interesting to know and study, and I will send you the reference of a very good book about this. But based on our attitude, our prevailing attitude, and how we feel in the moment, there are different ways that I would suggest you consider if you are dealing with a moment of difficulty or sadness. Let's see if I can move to the whiteboard. Okay, I have just listed 4 here. Are you able to see what's written on the whiteboard? Is it too far to be visible? No, okay. So I have to just tell you by words. There isn't a lot written on the whiteboard anyway, but let's say that you have a mystical approach to what you are. You feel one with everything. And this is a moment when something is making your heart very heavy. So one way you can choose to tackle this moment of difficulty is appealing to oneness and to one of those beautiful practices like the one described in a book by Joe Vitale. It's called Ho'oponopono. And if someone can spell it, could you write that on the chat? I think at least one of you will certainly know. Anyone knows about that? Okay, I volunteer to write that. Oh, there it is. I was sure. So the meaning of this, in Hawaiian, I can tell you the literal meaning, I don't remember that. But what it does is we assume that the problem, wherever it is also our responsibility, because we are all one. And we approach the problem with a sense of embracing and loving and feeling co-responsible. So say, for example, that I am a doctor and one of my patients is ill, and I think about my patient, say his name is Joe, and I say, Joe, I love you. I am sorry for this problem. Forgive me, please. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. What am I doing with these words? I am basically assuming onto myself the responsibility of his problem, because we are all one. And if you try this, focusing onto a person who has a problem or with whom you have a problem, you may have a very new feeling about this, as if you are giving up on your desire to oppose, and instead you are trying to make the whole fracture come together as one again. Look it up, have a look at this more in depth if you feel this resonates with you, and give it a try. I personally found it very useful to feel a sense of peace. This is something you do mentally, because it doesn't require that the person or whatever the situation is close to you at that moment. You just consider an inner dialogue. If this person is present, I suppose you can do that just as well, but do not consider that as a necessity. You can do that even from far away. And you will find that it may be a challenge to say I love you to somebody that has created you a problem. We normally say this very easily to the people that are part of our family or with whom we have a close relationship. But saying this to someone who maybe we have not met so well, or who has not treated us very well, can you do that? That is a challenge for the mystic inside of you. So consider this as the challenge if you feel in a mystical attitude and you want to address a problem. Have a go. And you will see, and it can probably work wonders for you. Let me go over my own notes. Let's say you feel like looking at the problem from a more analytical point of view. You want to dissect things and see what is happening. There are techniques which can help you, where you consider all the characters of your inner, let's say, comedy as on a stage, and you give each of the characters a presence on your inner stage, just like imagining you are with these people, or one person or various people, and in turn you interrogate each of them, you give them the opportunity to speak, and then listen. It's not necessarily words that you're going to hear back. It may be also feelings, it may be colors, it may be postures. So if your nature allows you to visualize things internally, or just to hear things internally as a response to your prompt, you ask your characters inside to speak up, say, why do you find it so difficult to be with me? Why are you treating me this way? And you might find interesting things that come up internally. So this is called psychosynthesis, and it has been developed by an Italian psychologist called Assagioli. Let me write that for you. That's the last name. Not sure about his first name, but so for the analytical, or let's say conceptual part of you that wants to understand things and use a magnifying glass, you may want to consider this. Look at your problem as if you are a scientist and interrogate each part. I mentioned the warrior early on. What would a warrior do when a painful thought, or let's say a thought, creates a painful feeling? Because thoughts themselves are not painful, but they can start a painful feeling in your chest, in your solar plexus. So what would a warrior do? Well, the technique there is called light and presence. So what do? Go down into the aching spot with your presence. So say aching spot is in the center of your chest. So bring your presence down there. Of course, feel present. Be the observer that is inside of you. And with this shiny armor of your presence, go as close as possible to the center of this knot of energy that is giving you such a painful feeling, and stare at it from close by, shining your energy without any thought. It's not about thinking. This is about illumination. So it's about casting light onto the painful knot inside of you. You will notice that it doesn't resist your light and feels the urge to disappear because you are stronger than anything that moves in your centers, like the emotional center, when you are present. There is no way it can resist you as long as you can maintain a strong presence. So if you feel bold and fearless, wear your shiny armor and go and shine your light onto the problem. This is for, I say that the fearless, not for the faint of heart, okay? But I've tried that in difficult situations, and I can tell you that it really pays. So if you feel like doing that, go for it. Your presence will melt the problem, or at least will make it go away. There is one more interesting character that is found in the list of archetypes, or also in the tarot. If you are into tarot, you may find that these same figures that you cannot see on the whiteboard, but are there. These same figures, they appear in the tarot as well, which is a source of wisdom. And that is the fool or the trickster. What would a fool do when faced with a problem? Do you think he would take it seriously? No way. The fool will just laugh at it. How can you laugh about something so serious as an emotional pain? Oh, it's not very difficult. Just be trained physically to move your solar plexus, and the best gym you can do for this is available online and it's called laughter yoga. So make a note of this. I'm writing that. This guy that I'm writing on the chat, Madan Kataria, is a medical doctor in India. I think is one of the benefactors of humanity in these years, because he has created a set of techniques that we can use to elicit laughter physically through a mechanism that he describes as a motion creates emotion. In other words, a certain movement, a certain posture, a certain attitude and exercise of the diaphragm can help you to create laughter. And the effect of laughter, whether it comes from a great joke or comes from a physical exercise, is the same. In other words, you will get the same extra amount of oxygen in your blood. That is the best cure against cells becoming cancer cells, by the way. You will have a more let's say your blood will receive more endorphins from your glands, and after a while you will feel like regenerated, and you will find yourself wondering, what was I sad about? I can't remember. Well, that's not really a problem. It just doesn't matter. What is important is that you may even turn this into a sort of inner jujitsu. So let's say that you have a thought that really haunts you and comes onto you all the time. If you program yourself to say, whenever I have that thought, I will become aware of myself and I will laugh at it. Then I'll say, oh, by the way, thank you very much for coming, because you have awakened me one more time and you're helping me in my path to self-realization. So thank you very much. So this is turning the strength or the malice of our enemies into something we can use for our own good. If there is an entity out there that is throwing this little arrow at us, and what it receives in exchange is a heartfelt thank you, you're helping me, it will really have to rethink its strategy, won't it? So these are, in a nutshell, some of the ideas that I'd like to share with you. You may have more. For example, prayer. Prayer can be a fantastic tool. Try to do that with presence, of course. Try to not just worship images, because otherwise it won't go very far. It will just stop, let's say, at the border of your aura, so to speak. You may also look for solace in nature. You may go look for a friend. You may watch a funny movie. If laughter yoga is still not too easy for you, you may have a glass of wine. No more. Anyway, there are several things we can do. These are just 4 that I thought I would mention because are less frequently mentioned and are not very well known. especially the one about light and presence is something that perhaps is only being mentioned here currently. So you want to know about that. Okay, well, I would like to wrap this up because it's been a bit lengthy. Hope it was useful as well. Let me just look if there's something that still. Okay, I'd say that what I meant to cover has been covered, although synthetically. There are several possible ideas for you to look into or develop or ask me about. And at this point, I would like to stop our recording and move into the second part. So this is where the recording ends.